Okay, so I'm here with a terrible idea. I want to just brainstorm an idea of how I would add the character of Blade into the MCU. This is something I kind of talked at my brother about, so he's given me some feedback about it. And his main consensus was I shouldn't keep this to myself. And with the recent Hollywood writers' strike, I also figure this is the opportune time to throw a terrible idea out into the world. So, what do I want? Yeah. So, there's going to be really no structure as to what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of train of thought, just putting whatever is in my brain, saying it aloud, and whatever clicks, gonna write down into this notepad. So, Blade. What do I know about Blade? Everything I know about Blade comes from the Wesley Snipes Blade movie. Not even the whole trilogy. I have no recollection of watching the whole trilogy. Just the first Blade movie. So, what do I know? He's a vampire. He's a half vampire, or more specifically, Blade is a daywalker. By being a daywalker, that means he's, how would they put it? He has the strengths of a vampire, but none of the weaknesses. Or something like that. Okay. All right. Yeah, immediate brain fog. It's a lot easier when a game is going to be able to guide you. My creativity, not that amazing. So, being a daywalker, he can walk around in the daylight. Obviously. Of vampires, none of weaknesses. Yeah, I remember in that movie, he consumed an artificial blood, which was blue. And I've seen the Morbius movie, and I know that they basically copied everything from Blade 1 into Morbius. So you kind of have to throw it all out. So everything I know, useless. Well, not everything I know, but mostly everything I know. All right. So the question is, where do you add Blade to the MCU? Really, I think there's only two possible ways. one is some event happened and now people are mutating into vampires. Because you do have to explain kind of where the vampires have been all this time. So I don't think that's a great option, even though I think it's a possibility. I'm going with the second path, which is vampires have always been here. So the vampires have always been around. Why would somebody like the Sorcerer Supreme not be like, oh yeah, vampires are in the world? Well, it's because the Sorcerer Supreme deals with supernatural, extra dimensional threats. What if vampires have always been on Earth? Then it's like, all right, well, that would explain why, the Sorcerer Supreme deals with demons, but not vampires. Because vampires are, yes, a part of mutation. Let's see. Vampirism is just a part of human genetics, a fluke of evolution. So I would have it be like 1 in 1 million people who die. I mean, it's not an exact science, but that's kind of how they feel about it. Vampirism is such a rare trait in humanity that the number of people who have the possibility of becoming a vampire don't meet the requirement because they were never bitten by a vampire. So the actual number could be even lower. So this is kind of so this section here is more or less the backstory, somebody opening narration type thing. So now the question is, when do I add Blade to the MCU? Now, Blade story specifically, I would have it start at the snap. Because what was it Thanos wanted? Wanted half of all life to be removed from existence. So I'm pretty certain that was his actual thing. Let me just double check that to be sure. What? What was it Thanos wanted? All right. Okay. Decimate half of all life in the universe. All right. So vampires are very interesting because they're not technically alive. They are undead. After the snap, half of all the vampire food vanished. So half of their food went away, but suddenly, ooh, that's not good. So that will bring us to Blade. All right. So again, all I know is what I saw in the first movie, and I saw that what 20 almost 30 years ago. I don't remember what happened. So, all right. First things first. What is Blade's name? His name is Eric Brooks. Okay. Yeah, this is the in true Hollywood writer fashion. Yeah, I don't know anything about what's going on. So I'm doing some of the research as I am writing. So Eric Brooks. Um, I think there's been a lot of stuff about you know, oh, he's only half vampire because his mother was bitten by a vampire while she was pregnant and gave birth to him, and that's why he was not directly bitten by a vampire, but he has the vampire energy flowing through him, and that's how he became a daywalker. I'm not doing that. So he is going to be a leader of a daywalker coven. So daywalkers are just kind of a fluke of vampirism. If 1 in a million people who die from vampire bites become a vampire, it's equally or even more rare technically. Now, 1 in a million of people who become vampires become daywalkers. So it's an even smaller number of people. And because they're kind of the freaks in the vampire society, because daywalkers are considered like freaks in the vampire society, whenever somebody becomes a daywalker, they're immediately outcast. Now, this isn't just because vampires are mean, even though generally they will be. The reason vampires do this is because daywalkers pose a huge threat to them. Because vampires operate in the shadows. They thrive in the night. When they're able to, get away with some of the vampire things they get up to. So if somebody's doing the vampire stuff during the daytime in public with far more witnesses, that puts the local vampire coven at risk. So there is a reason, a precedent, that daywalkers basically are a danger to the coven. Ooh. Looks like my computer was having trouble keeping up. So Eric's coven Eric's coven of daywalkers. They are considered an eccentric bunch. Like, yeah, they're freaks, but they mostly keep to themselves. They mostly keep to themselves, and in general, it's like none of the other groups have to worry about them. Nobody has to worry about them because he also is kind of doing the other covens a favor by keeping daywalkers in line. So like any daywalker who happens to get near Eric's coven, they're told the rules. Like, the rules are no eating humans. And don't bother the other covens. No eating humans. Don't bother the other covens. No excessive use of powers. Basically, they live their lives and nobody would even know they're vampires. So, the no eating humans thing, what would they eat then? Well, I don't want them feasting on magical blue false blood like they did in the original movie, because like I mentioned earlier, that happened in Morbius. I it's not a good movie, but because it's there, I want to distance whatever I can from that film. So I'm gonna borrow from another famous vampire family. Let's see here. That's what it's going to be. They lit this coven is Washington State. And unbeknownst to other vampires, diet consists of deer. You know, deer, rabbits. Are there rabbits in the state of Washington? Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Deer, rabbits. What are some other foresty prey animals? Hmm. I'm just gonna put etc. So yeah. Uh, yeah. It's Twilight. They're vampires who walk around in the day. They don't want to show off who they are for risk of endangering vampire kind. Yeah, I have no problem just saying it's Twilight. It's I mean, if you ignore all the rest of the oddities in the series, like, okay, yeah, there is a lot of sense to be made. So, yeah, that's just gonna be a Twilight reference in Blade. Now then, on the flip side, it's like, okay, yeah, as Daywalkers enter and learn the rules, he also lets regular vampires know what's up. Like, hey, uh, this is our territory. We're just like any other coven. So, don't piss us off. And, the Pacific Northwest is kinda their territory. No. And this works out pretty well for the other vampires who the normal vampire covens exists in large cities. So you would have um like Los Angeles, uh I think Miami, New York City. Um let's see here. It's kind of want something in the middle. Although no, if I'm saying that the normal vampires are in major cities, it's like, okay, so if we split the United States into four quadrants, we got northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. All right, and those are just kind of the major majors. These are the major vampire covens. Smaller groups are just kind of all over the place. So the vampires just kind of agree, like, okay, we can exist with the Daywalkers off on their own space, so we don't need to bother them. And it's the Pacific Northwest. There's not a whole lot for them there. Like, okay, I think, what is the largest city in the Pacific Northwest? Seattle, Washington. So that is Seattle, Washington. So that works out. Lucky me. So, aside from being in I just looked it up. Forks, Washington. They're in Seattle, Washington. Not that big a deal. So, yes, the three major covens. Uh, so, as to not. It's like the Daywalkers are outcast, but because he's doing the rest of the vampires a favor by, taking in the one Daywalker every 10 years or so. It's like, yeah, they could just kill the Daywalker. It really makes no difference to them. But for the most part, it's like, all right, well, the Daywalker made their way over to Eric's tribe. So, in relative harmony, yeah, they exist in relative harmony. They have a system that works. Until it doesn't. The snap happens. Now, there's a huge imbalance because the Covens have all of their vampires to feed and half the available food. And because they don't want to reveal that they exist, they need to find a way to get more people, or at least manage the food supply. Because, as was mentioned before, vampires are a part of human genetics. They've been here for centuries, millennia even. Vampires have existed for centuries. There are just a lot of them all over the world. And now half of the food is gone? That's not going to work. So an opportunity rises. The vampires realizing that they need to, manage their resources better. They put themselves. Well, first they put themselves in major positions of power around the world. they do this because they need the human race together. And, replenish their numbers. Um, so, just all the major positions of power we currently have in the world, they put themselves up as politicians, religious leaders, yeah, politicians, religious leaders, crime lords, motivational speakers, and but they can't do all of this at night. Obviously, it's going to be really weird if, all of the people you're trying to, if all the world leaders only existed at nighttime. So they needed to strike a deal. Eh. The vampires make an arrangement with the Daywalkers. The Daywalkers manage the food. The Daywalkers become those important people everyone looked up to. Come, rallying points. Points for to come together and rebuild. And this works out well for the Daywalkers. The Daywalkers are no longer treated as outcasts. The Daywalkers are not outcasts anymore. They became essential. And, times are good for the vampires. And, from a human perspective, it's a very dangerous thing to watch, but for these vampires who are, they're an eccentric bunch. I don't have characters figured out. Oh, I don't think I mentioned this at the top. I have no history in writing basically anything. So, how to write compelling characters? That's for somebody with more experience to figure out if they want to do it. So, Marvel, if you do happen to see this, hit me up, slide into those DMs, and we'll see if we can work something out. Okay. Wow. All right. So we are now, things are looking up for the Daywalkers. Obviously, we know what happens later down in the timeline. Uh, when does Endgame take place? Mm-hmm. All right. So Endgame happens. New crisis for vampires. Suddenly, uh, the half of the food that vanished comes back. Now you have an abundance of food. The vampires can go back to how things used to be. They don't have to try to micromanage humanity to make sure everyone can be fed. So, what happens with the Daywalkers? It's like you have this group of people you had outcast from your society. Tell them, hey, you are now going to serve a very essential role. Um, Now that you don't need them anymore, do you tell them go back to being outcasts? Because let's face it, vampires don't like the Daywalkers. So what now? Obviously, you gotta kill the Daywalkers. All right. So this is what it is. Now we just watch as all the Daywalkers Eric has been caring for over the years are killed one by one. Because the vampires don't need them. This was actually the vampires' plan all along. This is it. This was the plan. So, Eric is assumed dead. Um, Uh, is assumed dead. Yeah, a rat runs past him, and yeah. So yeah, he uses the last of his strength to eat a rat. This keeps him alive. Because vampires have all sorts of supernatural powers. One of them is just getting life energy from things they eat. Eric um, he realizes um, if the vampires who kill him uh, and here is where Eric makes his decision of Blade's one mission. He abandons his name and this is basically where I would end episode 1. So, let's go. So yeah, it's going to end with him deciding to kill all vampires. All right. So I think yeah. Um my brain is a bit on the fried side. Like I said, I've never done any sort of writing, especially not on this level. But here's where I'm gonna call it for now. I might actually be able to just do like one episode of writing at a time. Yeah. Where is it starting off? Yeah. Yeah. This is the roughest of drafts. Although, no, the roughest of drafts is whatever has been floating around in my head. Draft. It's. I'd hesitate to even call this a draft. But this is the concept of how I would introduce Blade into the MCU. Um, all right. Well, yeah. So I, I have no idea what Marvel actually has planned for Blade. I just know not long ago they lost the lead writer, and yeah, then it was like when that happened, I was like, oh yeah, adding Blade to the MCU was like, oh, I would do it like this. And as I mentioned near the top, I spoke to about this with my brother, and I was just like, yeah, this is where I would add Blade into it. It's not hard. you have all the pieces, and somebody with better writing abilities can would theoretically be able to springboard off of these ideas to write interesting characters and an interesting story. But yeah, as far as like a pitch for how I would do a Blade miniseries, um, do I think it could happen in 6 episodes? Sure. I probably have 3 episodes worth of ideas and another 3 episodes of action happens. um, yeah, it's not a super deep or well thought out. We're not writers. We're not. That's not anything we normally do on the consumer side of a viewer's side of things. So, yeah. Um, Let me know what you think. If you have any feedback or whatever, feel free to let me know. And yeah, I think I'll do this again next week. All right. Bye.